There is a question that most people never stop to ask themselves. Not because it is too difficult, but because the answer is too uncomfortable. The question is this: what do you actually believe about yourself? Not what you tell others. Not what you post online. Not the confident face you show the world every morning. But deep inside, in the quiet place where no one else can hear, what do you truly believe you deserve? Because here is the truth that changes everything. Your life will never rise above the story you are telling yourself about who you are. The great philosopher William James once said, "The greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives." Today's story is about a beggar, a man who had nothing, a man who sat on the cold ground every single day, hand outstretched, waiting for someone to drop a coin into his palm. But one afternoon, something happened that no one saw coming. He refused money, and what he said next in that one moment changed not just his life, but the life of every single person who heard it. Stay with us until the very end, because the last words of this story might be the words you have needed to hear for a very long time. In a busy city filled with noise and rushing people, there was a railway station. Trains arrived and departed every hour. Thousands of people passed through every single day. Businessmen with briefcases, students with heavy bags, mothers carrying tired children, workers covered in dust heading home after long shifts. And in one corner of that station, beside the old stone pillar near the main entrance, sat a man named Samuel. Samuel was 52 years old. He had a worn gray blanket wrapped around his shoulders. His shoes had holes in them. His hands were rough and cracked from years of cold weather. Beside him sat a dented tin cup. Every morning Samuel arrived at the station before sunrise. He found his corner. He wrapped his blanket around himself. And he waited. He did not beg loudly like some others did. He did not shout or perform or tell dramatic stories to passers-by. He simply sat, cup in front of him, eyes down, waiting. Some people dropped coins without looking at him. Some people looked at him with pity. Some people looked through him, as if he was simply part of the wall, as if he was not a person at all. Samuel had stopped noticing the difference years ago. He had learned something that broke him more than the cold ever did, that after enough time, a person begins to believe what the world shows them. And the world had been showing Samuel the same thing for 11 years. You are invisible. You are nothing. You are less. And Samuel, slowly, quietly, without even realizing it, had begun to agree. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, the station was more crowded than usual. A regional fair had just ended in the city and thousands of people were rushing to catch their trains home. The noise was enormous. Announcements blaring. Children crying. Vendors shouting. Samuel sat in his corner as always, eyes down. Then he heard footsteps stop directly in front of him. He looked up slowly. Standing before him was a man unlike anyone who had ever stopped at his corner before. The man was tall, perhaps 60 years old. He wore a simple dark coat. Not expensive, not cheap, just clean and dignified. His shoes were polished. His posture was straight. But it was not his clothing that made Samuel look twice. It was his eyes. They were calm, completely calm. In the middle of all that noise and rushing, this man stood as if he existed in a different world entirely. A world where there was no hurry, no chaos, no pressure. The man looked at Samuel not with pity, not with disgust, not with the uncomfortable guilt that most people showed before quickly walking away. He looked at him the way you look at someone you genuinely see. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a note, a large one. He held it out toward Samuel. Samuel looked at the note. Then, something happened that surprised even Samuel himself. He slowly shook his head and pulled his hand back. The man raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not leave. He simply waited. And Samuel, in a voice rough from years of little use, said something that made the man go completely still. He said, "Sir, I have been sitting in this corner for 11 years. Thousands of people have given me money, and I am still here, still sitting, still waiting." Your money will not fix what is broken inside me. I have tried. It doesn't work. The station continued roaring around them. But between these two men, there was complete silence. The man slowly lowered the note. Then he did something unexpected. He folded his coat beneath him and sat down on the ground, right there, beside Samuel. On the cold stone floor of the railway station, people stared. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. A businessman in a suit sitting on the ground beside a beggar. It made no sense to anyone passing by. But the man did not seem to notice or care. He looked at Samuel and said, "You just said something that most people with houses, degrees, and careers have never been able to say. You said the truth. So let me ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Samuel looked at him. "If I gave you not money but 1 full year, 1 year where every morning you woke up and someone believed in you completely, someone who saw not what you are today but what you could be, would you be willing to work?" Samuel was quiet for a long time. The trains came and went. People rushed past. And finally, with a voice that cracked slightly, Samuel said, "I have not been asked that question in 11 years. The man nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "That is exactly the problem." The man's name was Mr. Harlan. He was not a billionaire. He was not a charity organization. He was not a government program. He was a retired schoolteacher who had spent 40 years watching students decide, consciously or unconsciously, whether they believed they were worth something. He had seen brilliant children give up because no one told them they were brilliant. He had seen struggling children rise because one person, just one, refused to see them as less. And for the last 8 years of his retirement, he had walked through this very station every Tuesday afternoon. Not to give money, but to look for the person whose eyes still had something left in them. He had found 7 people before Samuel. All 7 had gone on to build lives that surprised even themselves. He told Samuel none of this that day. He simply said, "Be here tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. Bring nothing, just yourself." And then he stood up, brushed off his coat, and walked away into the crowd. Samuel sat with the empty tin cup in front of him. And for the first time in 11 years, he did not look down. He looked straight ahead. Samuel showed up the next morning. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. Mr. Harlan did not give Samuel money. He did not give him a house or a job or a diploma. He gave him something far more powerful. He gave him language. Every morning they sat together for 1 hour. Mr. Harlan talked to Samuel the way a person talks to someone they fully respect. He asked his opinions. He disagreed with him sometimes. He challenged his thinking. He treated Samuel like a man with a mind worth engaging. And slowly, the way a plant grows toward light it did not know existed, Samuel began to change. Not his circumstances. Not yet. His story. The story he told himself about who he was. Within 3 months Samuel had gotten a small cleaning job at the station through a contact. Mr. Harlan introduced him to. It was not glamorous work. It was hard and underpaid. But every morning Samuel arrived on time. And every morning he stood a little straighter than the day before. Within a year he had saved enough to rent a small room. Within 2 years he had started teaching basic reading to other men in his building who had never learned. He had no degree, no certificate, no formal training, but he had something that no classroom had ever given him. He believed he had something worth giving. 5 years later, Mr. Harlan passed away quietly in his sleep. At his funeral, among the family members and former students and colleagues, stood a man in a clean, simple suit. He sat in the back row. When the service ended and people began sharing memories of Mr. Harlan, this man stood up. The room looked at him, not recognizing him. He said, "My name is Samuel. 5 years ago I was sitting on a cold floor in a railway station. A man sat down beside me and asked me a question that no one had asked in 11 years. He did not save me. He did something harder than that. He refused to see me as someone who could not be saved." The room was completely silent. Samuel paused. Then he said the words that he carried with him every single day. The most dangerous prison in the world has no walls and no locks. It lives inside a person's own mind. And the only key is someone who refuses to believe you belong there. He sat back down, and the room stayed silent for a very long time. And now, before this video ends, I want to ask you something directly. Is there a Samuel in your life right now? Someone sitting in their corner, eyes down, cup in front of them, not because they have no value, but because no one has sat down beside them long enough to remind them of it. Or, are you the Samuel? Are you the one who has been sitting in a corner, not of a railway station, but of your own life, waiting for someone to give you permission to believe in yourself? Because here is what this story is really saying. You do not need someone to hand you money. You do not need someone to hand you opportunity. You need someone to sit down beside you on the cold floor and refuse to see you as less than you are. And if no one has done that for you yet, then let this story be that moment. You are not invisible. You are not nothing. You are not less. You are simply someone who has not yet been asked the right question. So let me ask it now. If someone believed in you completely, what would you do with that? Think about it, and then go do it. If the story moved something in you, share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Because you might be the Mr. Harlan that someone else has been waiting for. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that don't just fill your time, but change the way you see your world. We will see you in the next story. Until then, sit down beside someone. See them. Really see them.